Catherine Gibson for Insight. Today, I'm joined by Nasim Zehra, one of Pakistan's leading journalists. She's the director of current affairs at Dunya TV, a popular news channel in Pakistan, and is also the host of a current affairs program, Policy Matters. Nasim, thank you very much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Catherine.
In a recent piece for the Express Tribune, you argue that a coup wouldn't have occurred in Pakistan in 1999 had there been an independent media. How has the Pakistani media developed over the past 10 years so that it could get to this point to influence events?
Well, I think what has happened is electronic media has been really the major game changer. We have a boom of channels and we have 100 plus independent channels, and what that has helped to do is basically it's overcome the language divide, the literacy barrier, etc. So a lot of the discussions on key issues are discussed in the national language, in Urdu and in other regional languages, with the result that the players, the coup makers, any kind of even insinuation that a coup is likely to take place or anything other than the constitutional move is going to be made, it's brought out into the public, it's discussed, etc. So I think the power of discourse, the power of debate has really increased many times since the last 10 years, and the responsibility for that increase in the power of debate, I think, comes from the electronic media primarily.
You mentioned the power of discourse and the power of debate. Given that Pakistani media, independent media, is still relatively new, do you find that the Pakistani public is sufficiently informed to make decisions about points of view and where they get their news from?
Well, in terms of where you get the news, there are 7, 8, 9 major channels, national channels, and they're available on most of the television networks, cables, etc. So, it's a question of what the people are experiencing in terms of credibility of information and the relevance of the discussion. So I don't think they need any kind of guideline or anything other than their lived reality.
And in terms of news, are the channels divided along political and ideological lines, and do people make those decisions based on those viewpoints?
Well, really, this is an interesting question. No channel has the luxury to be selective about the news that they give, because news is news. I mean, there's no ideology to a bomb blast, there's no ideology attached to what a political party is doing, there's no ideology attached to the crisis of, provincial crisis, a political crisis. So no matter what the editorial position of any channel may be, they have to cover all news.
What would you like to see more of in Pakistani media's coverage of the U.S.? What's missing?
More understanding of how the system works here in terms of, how debates and how decisions are taken, decisions take place, and perhaps a little more about, how American Pakistanis live their lives here. But news is about happening things, other things that happen beyond the ordinary. And in this relationship, unfortunately, too much happens beyond the ordinary. So that seems to get covered.
Does the Pakistani media practice self-censorship?
Over the years, this kind of practice has receded. I mean, in Pakistan today, whether it is, covering militant politics, terrorism, or whether it's covering troubled spots, and, whether it's violence, etc., breakdown of law and order, whether or to some extent, political repression. All those issues which were perhaps not discussed, and Pakistan Army's role in politics, intelligence agencies' role in politics, all of this is discussed. And editorially, there are few channels who decide, you can't discuss ABCD, because the truth is that in the world of a highly competitive media, once channel A and B are going to cover something, the others have to perforce go towards that story. So ironically, the commercial aspect ensures that there isn't too much of censorship. But there will be issues, if there's something, acute religious sensitivity or something which is really acutely going to undermine national security. For example, if there's some story that's come out on operation against certain terrorists, you'll probably hold back, because if that operation gets undermined against terrorists, by bringing it out in the open, you would obviously not do that.
Recently, 24 Pakistani troops were accidentally killed in an American airstrike. Can you take us through the Pakistani media's reaction to the event and the resulting inquiry into those events?
The killing of 24 Pakistani soldiers was, it may have been accidental, but the way it played itself out was, it came across as something that happened in a systematic way. And number one, SOPs were violated, standard operating procedures in terms of informing Pakistan. That's something that the NATO report and the American report that's come out on it also acknowledges. So first that happened, and then the initial information went in, and despite that they came back, special forces came back to attack the Pakistani soldiers. And then, so you take it up to that point, even if you were to everybody was to agree that it was an accident, but absolute refusal of the U.S. administration to apologize.
So this was debated quite a bit.
Absolutely, it was very critical. I mean, you tell me what would happen if 24 U.S. Soldiers, God forbid, their bodies came back wrapped in the American flag, and you were told that the Pakistanis had attacked and done this, and they are refusing to apologize. What would you do? I mean, naturally, this was a matter of great concern. It was a matter of great shock that there was a refusal of the U.S. Administration to apologize. I mean, it was completely, it left everybody shell-shocked that something like this happens and you don't apologize.
So how did you approach it on your program?
Well, precisely as I'm saying now. I mean, there was no room for, while we all kept saying, okay, it's not deliberate. That was a debate that went on. We brought people with different points of views to discuss it. There were some people who said, the Americans have this position, they're just against the Pakistanis, they've done it. Others said, well, it pretty much could be an accident, and obviously was an accident, whatever. But where there was total consensus and editorial consensus plus participants' consensus was, how can you do this kind of, let this kind of thing happen and you don't apologize? And I think there it was outrage is the word. In fact, let me tell you, we followed the State Department briefing specific on a specific day on this issue, and I recall that there were 14 times American journalists, these are American journalists or Pakistan, American journalists were asking your State Department spokesperson, why aren't you apologizing? And so I thought, and in fact we raised this in our program, where this was really the journalists speaking on behalf of how the Pakistanis were feeling.
And you feel it's your role as a journalist to seek that apology?
Well, I'm a Pakistani as well. I'm not a journalist who exists outside of a national context. And if the Pakistanis would have done, and as an anchor, my responsibility is to bring in people with different points of view. So there's a genuine debate, but I am a person who has her own opinion as well. So I can't be this, Pakistani with no views.
But there is a place for your opinion in your reporting.
Absolutely, and I think that it's my right.
We've talked about how far Pakistani media has come in the past decade. Looking ahead to the next 5 to 10 years, what issues do you want to see addressed? What improvements would you like to see made?
Well, I want to see a situation where some of the more substantive issues are discussed, where rating doesn't pull us away from discussing issues of the economy, issues that are not about the crisis here and now, that can be at some sustained level, issues of social impact, issues of economic development, issues of development. And somehow we don't seem to get to that because the crisis is such, and and the rating is such, because here's the issue about the electronic media especially. I think you ask yourself when you switch on the channel, you don't expect to have a serious, you don't want to be watching a serious debate. You want part entertainment, part information, part that. So that's basically what then somehow pulls us away from discussing issues in a more serious manner. I'd like to see that.
It's the constant problem.
Yeah, everywhere.
Well, Nasim, thank you so much for joining me today. It was very good to speak with you.
Thank you. Pleasure.